pounds, right?
Wrecking. You're wrecking.
What is that?
Wrecking. When you
What is
carry
that?
it, it's when you go with a heavy bag, a heavy load on your back.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't know if this laptop was a mistake or if it was the best decision I ever made, but it's definitely very heavy.
I feel like you need an intermediate model.
That's what the iPad is.
No. One between that. You need like an Air or something.
Man, lots of crazy stuff happening.
All right, we are recording. We are live. It's August 5th. This is the OSO Demo Day.
Thanks, Carl. Who wants to go first? I could go first. Mine's very easy, and it's cool because like it was such perfect timing. Like when I was talking to the Google folks yesterday, you just never know who's looking at what time, right? And he was like, "Oh man," I'm like, "You guys are working on some really cool stuff. Like I'm looking through your website and your docs, and like you guys have all this stuff that's like super relevant to us." And I was like, "Oh, awesome! I like made this website at exactly the right time." So yeah, let me share my screen.
Website for one person.
What's that?
The art of making a website for one person.
Hey man, if that one person is super high value, then it's all worth it, right? Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, all good.
All right. So yeah, new website. I think I want to I have not gotten a lot of feedback from you guys yet. I would love more feedback if anybody's willing to give it. I could share my immediate thoughts, but like this is more like these things end up being more important than you think. As I mentioned, like you have no idea who's looking at these things, and it might spur like conversations that you might not have thought of. I don't know if I'm trying to like emphasize or de-emphasize like the growth platform stuff. It's messaging that resonates with some communities, but not all the communities that we're trying to go after. But I also worry that like just being an AI data platform feels a little bit too generic and not really like, it's easy to glance over because everybody's an AI powered everything, right? So anyway, I'm still like thinking through the kind of messaging that is most applicable here. But yeah, I think I demoed some of this stuff at Stand Up previously, but other things that I would want to highlight for people to give more feedback on, in particular, like the why value prop section is probably one of the pages that I want us to craft to be the most, like the strongest language for people when they like want to understand why they're working with us, especially now that we're effectively trying to like take what we've built and expand beyond just the measuring impact for open source software in crypto, which is like a very, narrow niche. We've built such incredible technology to make that happen that is applicable in a lot of spaces. But like just navigating how to position this platform to a broader set of problems while still being like specific enough to actually draw people in and be interesting is an art. So yeah, like Ruben, if you have any thoughts, because I know yeah, like just having more diverse thoughts would help me a lot actually. Yeah, and then of course like we have all these product pages, which some of which are old and some of which are relatively new. Hey, we have some data connectors. Thanks, Ikaro. Yeah, very markety. But in particular, I'm trying to like craft specific solutions pages that I can share with different partners as we start to talk to different people in different spaces on why OSO could be useful for them. And so, yeah, as always, this is not set in stone and meant to be a work in progress. But please, somebody give me feedback because otherwise I'm just shooting in the dark a little bit. Does anybody
Yeah.
does anybody have any initial like reactions to this positioning?
I mean, I think to me it is still a little bit too broad. I would like to at least connect the who it might be for part. I think like previously, I'm not saying that what we had before was good, but I think being able to, provide the who part of the question. So who wants to grow? In that tagline, I think would be helpful. And then what you see further on will be illustrations of that.
Yeah. Do you have a good sense of who that who is? Because I think like let me say who I'm very confident that it's not, and let me say who I'm like not so sure that it is, right? I'm very confident that it is not crypto ecosystems because we already are talking to every major crypto ecosystem. We don't need them to look at our marketing page, right?
Sure.
So yeah, who is the who outside of that?
I mean, yeah, probably a longer conversation, not on demo day, but I think that it is other entities that have, I don't know, internet native events or something like that. So it's something around. Again, I keep coming back to this idea of there being a way to measure internet GDP, right? So anyone whose primary economic impact is not well captured by traditional statistics, but would be ideally measurable, maybe loosely, through some kind of internet GDP, feels like our target audience.
Yeah, it's a reasonable framing. I like this general direction. I don't know how to translate it yet, but let's pull on this thread a little bit more. Yeah, I like this. Cool. Any other thoughts?
I still need to spend more time on it. I'm sorry. I'm guilty.
Well, everybody has edit access,
same.
so feel free to jump in. Yeah, cool. All right, I'll let someone else go next.
All right. I guess I'm next in the queue. Did I show the retro funding results last time around? I don't think, or the analysis that we did on the effectiveness of all the different retro funding programs. I don't think we did. I think I pushed it around that time. Okay, I'll start with that. Let me just pull it up 1 second. Okay. You know the saying, which is like, give me a 5,000 word blog post and you can do that in a week, and give me a 500 word post and that will take you like 5 times longer. This definitely felt like one of those exercises where there are just many, many threads, and it could have done with some more kind of condensing. But I basically ran out of the clock and had to ship something. There is a lot here. I've been trying to kind of go through and synthesize some of the highlights in Twitter threads, and I'll probably have some microblogs that reference some of the concepts that we introduce here. But in any case, this is a 2-part blog series that looks at the impact of retro funding season 7, both on developer tools and on on-chain builders. Let me just give a few highlights. Well, yeah, you can get the takeaways over here. I think probably the most interesting analysis that we have here are these 2 parts, 6 and 7. So 6 is basically trying to get a sense of, if you have a tool, how important is it to, say, the superchain versus all of Ethereum versus all of Web2 versus some other way of defining an ecosystem. And we introduced a very, very simple center of gravity concept. Thank you, Ray, for the name. I'm not sure if I bastardized the approach. But what we basically do is we kind of benchmark the number of builders on the superchain relative to all the other builders in OSO, which is admittedly a relatively skewed distribution. It leans very much Ethereum, very much the partners that we work with in the past or that have created their own projects on OSS directory. But it is a large data set. It includes many projects that are not part of the superchain, so to speak. And from that, you can get a sense of which projects are really, really superchain heavy and which ones are kind of maybe more Filecoin heavy or more kind of early crypto heavy. And I feel like as a starting point, this actually performed fairly well. So you can take something like Ethers, which is basically used by anyone who's doing stuff on, with EVM, and you have kind of a baseline around 12% for that. And then you have some things which are very superchain specific, had a much higher center of gravity, like 33%. And then there's some other examples like libp2p, which is used by a lot of kind of layer ones, but it's not really superchain specific, which had a much lower center of gravity. So that's kind of one thing. And I think over time, if retro funding is successful, you would see projects shift their center of gravity, and also projects that have a higher center of gravity get more funding. I think that would be like a hypothesis we could track over time. The second thing, this is like before we started our reading group, but last year there was a paper that we read, and we had a kind of a session with the author of just around how to value open source software in the broader economy. They basically count lines of code, work backwards to how long it would take to replicate that code, and then they have a way of assigning a wage based on where the developer was based. We actually kind of come at this from a similar methodology, slightly different implementation. So we start, with our concept of full-time developers and part-time developers, and then we take the same global weighted average wage that they were using, and we put together a cost of substitution. So one version of that is if you literally took the amount of time that went into it and said, we're just going to pay for that again, you'd have a lower bound estimate of around $26 million for all these different tools. If you said that every single project that is using the tool, that is building on the superchain, had to rebuild it, then you get an upper limit, which is around $1 billion or so. And then you can apply the center of gravity, and that gets you a number around 100 million. Obviously, this is a hugely assumption. The assumptions are very important here. But as a way of kind of bounding the value of these tools, it's a reasonable starting point, at least. And then obviously, the thing, yeah, what's up, Ray?
Yeah, maybe taking one quick higher step back first. I feel like this compared to your other retros, like in other retros, you were a little bit more colorful in what your read is of the situation and what your takeaway is. A good example of that is like us being very anti, peanut butter spread in retro funding 5 and 6, right?
Yep.
And I'm curious, like, what your thought, like behind the scenes, what your thought process is here. Were you trying to avoid ruffling too many feathers? Were there any takeaways like that you are willing to say but not willing to write? I don't know.
I personally think the developer tooling is working very well. I think that you can, for what people wanted to reward, which skews much, there's a bias towards funding libraries as opposed to general OSS, block indexers and analytics tools and things like that. I think it is doing that very well. The products that appear at the top are really strong projects. There's a pretty interesting mid-tail segment. I can give some examples of that, actually. So if you kind of come in and see the overall distribution, these top projects like Ethers, Hardhat, OpenZeppelin and Contracts, it's very clear that they belong at the top of the list. Foundry applied late, but they are definitely moving up. So if you compare how those projects did relative to the last round, in my opinion, it is a much stronger showing for those projects. And the link to why they're valuable for the superchain is much clearer. Another example, like Viper, it has done pretty well historically. It's just not very popular in the superchain, which is fine. It was more kind of OG Ethereum mainnet DeFi applications that were using it. And you can also, if we kind of scroll down, we can get a sense of like what these teams look like. So in general, let me see, there's a better exhibit of this. Let's see, sorry, where is it? Most teams are pretty small. There's a lot of solo maintainers. Forgot where it was. Can't find it. But yeah, most teams are pretty small. A lot of solo maintainers. In general, there aren't any kind of large private companies that are just trying to capitalize on a small kind of open source contribution. in general, it's a pretty good mix. And the results kind of show that. Even looking at the ones that did not get any funding, there's pretty clear reasons why they haven't done that. So yeah, I think it, just compared to previous rounds, I think it is funding what it intends to fund. Now, the bigger question is, should you fund these things? And if so, how much should Optimism pay for relative to others is a huge open question. I don't think that, the business case is strong for Optimism being the only one who is funding these things, especially given that they're used by a lot of other, projects and ecosystems. That said, I think the amount of funding that Optimism is providing, at least for this particular season, seems reasonably well calibrated with the amount of impact that those projects have had. So yeah, by and large, I would say I think the developer tooling one is working as intended quite well. The longer term question is, does this actually make it so that you have more innovation happening because it's easier to deploy in the superchain as opposed to other chains? Does it actually start saving teams costs because they don't need to build all these things? They can just use best in class libraries. TBD, but I think for where it is, I think it's doing quite well. This is not mentioned as much here, but there's also been a number of newer projects that kind of started over the past year or so that have done pretty well and have quickly moved up the ranks. And you can see that these were not ones that would have been identified by experts, but are actually very popular among builders, which is, again, the way the system should be working. Broadly speaking, the other thing that we'll look at is this idea of overall growth in monthly active developers. What you can see here is that we have kind of three different cohorts here. One are projects that are only on the superchain, Optimism only. We have another one, which is other ecosystems. And then finally, we have products that are in both. And you can definitely see strong performance, particularly for full-time developers within products that are much more focused on Optimism. Now, again, our data probably does have a bit of a bias because we have more recent data. We'll be able to check this with the new Electric Capital data set that we have. But I think in general, it seems to be the case. The other example of where this is really happening, just skipping ahead to the on-chain builders one, there are, so here's the distribution. Again, I think it's a pretty good distribution. A lot of activity coming from these WorldChain mini apps. 6 months ago, none of these existed. Now they're getting a lot of activity. They are generating a lot of user operations, et cetera. And they are very, very motivated by retro funding. You can definitely see that in the data. We'll be doing a deep dive on that. If I were to criticize something, I would say that the incremental impact of funding the DeFi projects, these are really, really big projects where 100,000 OP is not going to make a big difference, is much less clear. I think in general they receive 51% of the rewards. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on that category, particularly in terms of bringing more TVL onto the super chain or trying to support more chains than Base and Unichain and Inc, the ones that have a lot of DeFi activity already. I'm not sure if that's the case. The other one which has been cool to see is that the account abstraction has really taken off. We see that in our data. There's a lot of products that are using it. The superchain is very far ahead of other ecosystems in terms of usage for account abstraction. Again, I think that those are two good examples of having a improved developer experience and some network effects around other projects that are using the same tooling, being able to really dramatically increase the rate of innovation. So I think that has been a good sign. And yeah, the mix of products is pretty different. So we don't have the ability to do a strong comparison of the ones that were last applying for retro funding and the ones that are at the top now. There is just pretty high turnover in general among those projects. But in terms of the extent of how much how much economic activity is captured in these retro funding statistics, it's pretty large. Most of, let me just see, we can go back over here. So basically, contracts from retro funded products appear in 40% of superchain transactions over this period. So it's a pretty large share. And obviously, there's a lot of people just sending USDC peer-to-peer, which is not captured here. So I would say of like the interesting application level activity, it has a pretty high economic footprint. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, we can also do a comparison of like TVL growth over time. Again, the superchain did quite well. However, that was heavily led by two projects, so Uniswap and Morpho, which basically had a very large amount of activity starting in March, and that basically gobbled up a lot of TVL from both Ethereum mainnet and elsewhere. Yeah, so those are the posts over here. There's some recommendations for things that we'll hopefully be doing to improve the measurement. But yeah, any other questions?
Just we did launch this last week, right? Like, what's the reception been so far on the post?
I would say it's been fairly quiet. I think just in general, there hasn't been a lot of governance energy right now. So there haven't been any negative takes. There's been some, some reposts and some likes and stuff like that, but no one deeply engaging with it, unfortunately.
I think the other thing, as you're talking, that comes to mind for me is, where it gets interesting, which very much every time you say something like this, it reinforces my pre-existing beliefs. So I'm not sure if this is good or bad, but like I've always been under the condition thinking that like you these are just like funding is just stimuli into a system, and you're trying to incentivize the most change per unit dollar, right? So every time you say something like, oh, funding the giant DeFi projects may or may not make a difference, or funding XYZ may not actually be the best use of money, or like, should we be the only ones funding, some of these common core projects? I think one of the things that I think Jonas had brought up in the past that I thought was really interesting was leveraging OP Atlas more as a surface to communicate with builders. And, more of like kind of not just the metrics of what your rewards are this last season, but like what are the things that you can do to improve them for the next measurement period, or what are the types of things that the super chain would want to see to see more center of gravity or to see more onboarding. Like, has there been any renewed effort in that space, or is that?
So I think right now there's a general desire to slow down a little bit on pouring more funding into these incentive mechanisms until we can actually step back and see how are they working, which is maybe a good segue into the next thing that I can demo, which is actually trying to help answer some of those things. Should I switch over?
Sure.
Okay. I was hoping to have this finished. It's not quite there, but it will give you. Oh, let me share this tab. Okay. So basically, what we will be able to do once this is finished is look up any funding mechanism over any season of time, and basically be able to, first off, just compare apples to apples. So you can look at the overall superchain, and then you can look at the cohort of funded projects, how they did on any number of indicators. So we have, pure transactions, we have fees paid, we have DeFi Llama TVL. We can add to this list, especially where there are things that we can track. And then, yeah, you can come in and you can select the season that you want. The other thing I can show it, actually, it'll be easier in the notebook view. So you can also kind of do a deep dive on the projects themselves. Let me just pull this up. Sorry. There's a lot here. Is this one? Yes, okay. Yeah, it looks a bit ugly right now, but you can basically get all of the projects. And then I've started just adding some simple tags based on how they perform relative to the the median and I think the 80th percentile or so. And so you can identify for a given grant round at that particular period of time. So kind of looking at where things were at the start, and then I think it's like 90 days following, So how much is retained after the incentive period ends, who has performed the best, right? And then you can have some comparison to Superchain overall, and then to all the products that were in that cohort. And so you can identify top movers and for any given metric, how they performed and so on, as well as the ones that are really poor performers and so on, which I think is going to be very, very useful. Certainly for the grants council, being able to come back in and reassess their performance at the time, or maybe even when they go in, start articulating why they think something is going to go up, and then you can come back 6 months later and actually rate their performance. That would be very powerful. So going back to answering your question, I think we're now in a position where we will be able to look at each of these retro funding rounds, each of these grant council rounds, and start to give it a report card or something based on some combination of these things. That's getting a bit into what we want to do in season 8 with optimism in general, but I think now the infrastructure is here to do all of that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool.
Up another one. 7. Yeah, you can see how these update. You can see, Sonium launched around this time, really big at first, and then things went down. The other thing that this is pulling in is we now have a few new models. One of them is this model called chain metrics, basically. So it consolidates things from Grow the Pie, from DeFi Llama, from our own data set. And I don't know, I think it's 30 different metrics that you have here. From this, you can also, and it's not just the chains that we cover, so it's all sorts of chains. So you can calculate things like market share, changes in market share over time for any of these indicators. Now, we're not yet at the point where we can drill down and say, here's this project in terms of stablecoin market cap, but that's hopefully a place we can get to.
Cool.
And with that, we're able to offer all the things that are kind of in the Superchain Health dashboard currently.
Yeah, what else is missing on the dashboard that we need to gather?
Nothing big. There's a few little issues that I've written up. I don't think it's, There's one thing that Javi merged earlier, which is just the different categories. So we have lending, we have stables, and so on. Once we create a few models based on that, then I think we're basically there.
Cool.
Nice.
I don't have a demo here, but we do also have the crypto ecosystems data.
Yeah. I feel like Javi has a lot of things he wants to demo. Maybe Ruben, you want to squeeze in next real quick, and then we can save the rest of the time for Javi.
Sounds good.
All right. I just realized I'm still in my pajama t-shirt. I had to get up so early this morning that I did not change.
What is the difference between a pajama t-shirt and a normal
It's just the one
t-shirt?
I always sleep in. This is my Bruce Lee DJ, Yeah,
I
because
feel
he's
like that
great.
could be a normal t-shirt.
It's a normal t-shirt.
I'd walk around in it.
Okay. Oh shit. Oh no. What is this? Oh no, you're asking for more permissions. Okay. Oh, let's just share the entire screen. Cool. You guys can see this?
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm getting an echo. Hello? Okay, cool. Okay, so there are a couple things I wanted to go over. So one of them is not done, and one of them is very much done. So the first thing that I made a kind of a larger change to is I introduced struct log. If you guys aren't familiar, struct log is, and I can't imagine anyone is familiar. It's just a structured logging. So now if you go into the repo, in OSO core, so OSO core, you can call structured logging setup here, and you can configure structured logging. So there are a couple things with this. It gives you really nice logs. So if you look here, you can, you know, annotate the logs with some cool stuff like event types, function names. You know, like I for the things that do timing, I add duration milliseconds here. So yeah, super duper useful. I think we should use it. For things that we intend to be external libraries, I would not use the struct log. Like I would not import it in there because then you would have to force everyone to have struct log. So we actually do something kind of cool. So I actually take over the rendering of all, like I add a processor. So struct log supports this to all logs. So you can add structured logging by doing something like, this is going to cause an error, but it'd be like logging.info and then blah, and then extra. And you add a structured thing here. It's just a dict, and it'll take anything, and it'll output it correctly like this. On the server, we actually render it as JSON because JSON can be parsed, and that goes on to this next part that I'd like to show. So if you go to again here, log explorer. So yeah, now if we wanted to look at let's say the Dagster timing information. I'm still trying to figure out a couple things here, but in terms of like how to present this better, it would be really cool if I could do something like I don't know if anyone's used Elasticsearch, but you can basically generate metrics via the logs. So hold on. What? Wait. Why is this not showing any? Hold on. That's weird. This was showing a little earlier, so it's very strange that okay. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I'm trying to see if okay, so let's try this again. I'm just going to start from the beginning. So basically, to get you're going to want to look at a specific resource or workload. So the best one, the one that we're care about right now is production Dagster. I see. I think it's not a large enough time. Give me a second. How do I change this? Let's do the last. Oh, that's worse. 3 hours. Cool. Okay, perfect. So then we can do things like, filter on a given, what do you call? Log type. So we can do kind event. What's a good one? Where's the event type? Why is this not showing up? I swear this was working.
Type, is there a type? Oh,
oh, here it is.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So if you look up event type timings, these are all of the timing events for a given for when Dagster loads. So these happen only really at the beginning of each Dagster pod. So we can take a look at so we have the DuckDB importer factory. So this is timing that specific thing. So we can see now with the JSON payload, we get this event payload here. We can actually look at the duration. So if we're able to, if I can figure out how to get like a histogram of these things, we can do some like analysis, better analysis, look at the get some like percentiles and whatnot for each of the these loads. But like this one here is 142 milliseconds for the secrets factory. That's how long this one took to load for whatever reason. If we look, but what I discovered in this most recent sort of exploration is the SQL mesh assets. So let's try and find the right one. So there's probably down here. It's loading the module, factory. Yeah, here. So here, so this is all of SQL Mesh itself. If you look at this, wait a minute, it's not correct. Huh. Well, these timings are right. Wow, this is like it's like the demo gods really, really not one. Oh my God, here we go. So I don't know what happened with that last one. It may have been erroneous data, but here you can see the value is 98,000 milliseconds for loading the SQL Mesh factory. I may have been looking at the wrong thing as well, actually. And then this one here is the SQL Mesh exports. And both of these together, these actually, you're gonna have to trust me now because it's hard to kind of view all of the data. But these are the two most like time-consuming loads for Dagster. I also have a hunch that they're also that these also spike memory because they end up loading the entirety of SQL Mesh in and then doing a bunch of processing, and it does it one after the other. So it's not necessarily a lot of processing, but I'm guessing that it loads enough in memory because we generate so many different queries with our metrics factories that it's probably just the Python garbage collection can't keep up, right? So you can see here, there's a final load. Let's see, load definitions. Oh boy. Well, cool. So you're just gonna have to trust me on that one again as well. I'll show you here, actually. So this is my local machine. And you'll get a full load definitions. Like load definitions is the final function that is loaded. Or sorry, the legacy main is the main function that loads all of Dagster, and then there's load definitions, which is just loading like just our custom code to load definitions. So as you can see here, so this is running the improvements that I'm still working on, but I'm able to take now some of the SQL Mesh. I'm not going to run this again, but now the SQL Mesh factory loads from cache. So it went from on my local machine from 40 seconds to right now it's actually taking 1.5 milliseconds, which is kind of insane. That actually hopefully isn't just a bug. Oh, there is a bug. That's fine. But now the SQL Mesh export also took about 40 seconds, and it's now taking 14 milliseconds. So and this one is not erroneous. So yeah. But more things to come here, but this is kind of where we're moving with all of this. And the only thing that I'm working on right now is trying to get so I had not realized that that fixing the Dagster SQL Mesh would not fix the SQL Mesh export. I should have actually probably traced that. So I just need to rip out some of the code and refactor that a bit so I can share them. Right now I copy pasted a bunch of things to just force the SQL Mesh export to work, just so I can know that it works. But yeah, this is where we are. Any questions?
Sorry, what were you saying at the end there about SQL Mesh export? Like, why is that different?
Oh, yeah. So SQL Mesh export is different because SQL Mesh export is the thing that processes and generates the Dagster assets for the ClickHouse, BigQuery, and those two exports. And it has to, the way that we do it right now is it reprocesses all of the, like it essentially, it kind of duplicates some code from the the Dagster SQL Mesh stuff to reprocess all of the SQL Mesh models. So now what I'm going to be doing is is actually allowing us to cache at a different level, so we don't have to do that multiple times. So I'm just I'm ripping out some of the code from Dagster SQL Mesh and putting it into the main repo, into the mono repo instead. So yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Got it.
But yeah, my hope is, this will help with everything load wise. So, like right now, it's actually quite pleasant to run Dagster locally. So, which is pretty cool because it was not pleasant before. Like every reload took like 80 seconds. So, and now it's 6. Oh, that's all I got for now.
Nice. One thing that I've never quite understood when running Dagster locally is when you actually need to grab stuff from BigQuery, because is it for any model that is going to be using BigQuery as a source?
Yeah. So I guess technically you shouldn't need to grab from BigQuery anytime locally if you set the right configuration. That being said, like not all of our things work without that. So we need to
Okay.
that there's some additional work there to make some of those things just work like locally. So we can at least test it without having to worry about connecting to BigQuery.
Cool, but that would be the goal, is that you don't need to authenticate with anything.
Yeah, that would be the goal. I think if we can, make it such that any external contributor could just like start running Dagster, and so that they can. I think the most annoying thing is actually having to connect to BigQuery in order to run DLT, because that's like probably the thing we test the most often. And yeah, we don't have a way to do that right now.
Cool. Javi, you want to go?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm sorry if my voice feels a little bit raspy. I'm kind of sick, so I won't turn my camera on. But I have a lot of exciting things to show, actually. So let's start from the beginning. First thing that I want to show is I finally, where can I share my screen? Yeah, here. Yeah, perfect. So I finally shipped the GraphQL refactor. It's really a substantial refactor. So let me explain how it works. So for people who are not familiar with Dagster, I'm going to with Dagster internals and like these factors, I'm going to give a small some tips. So basically, this DLT factory, what it does is it wraps a function that returns like a DLT resource, which is like, let's say for example, it's like a okay. So sorry, let me explain. So in DLT, which is what we use mostly for moving data around, we have 2 really important building blocks, which are the source and the resource. A source is just an aggregation of resources, and every time you want to yield data from like an endpoint or from like a place, you want to return a resource. So how it worked earlier was that we had all of this abstracted away. So in order to create like a new factory, it's something like, I don't know, like factory equals you did the GraphQL factory like this, right? So this would get picked up at load time, and everything else would just like work under the hood. The thing is that we lost a lot of like functionality because we didn't have access to, like, for example, here, where we could actually use the dependency injection mechanism that we have set up, and we couldn't like define relationships, and we couldn't do a lot of things. So the first thing that I did was like, now this GraphQL factory returns a DLT resource. This is really cool because we have now this dependencies field, which allows us to pass a function that takes a context and some data, and then just returns a DLT resource generator, which means that we can basically convert this factory into like a tree, and then only the leaves will be yielded. So for all of the intermediate nodes, what will happen is like it will be fed into the dependencies, and we can do stuff based on like those data. So it's really cool because now we can traverse GraphQL APIs and form really complex relationships via these dependencies thingy. So another cool thing is like everything is fully typed, which means that here we're inheriting from resource, so we have everything under the hood. So if we just like start typing everything, it will be completely typed, which is like super cool. and it uses some nice stuff from from Python. In this case, for example, we use here. We use concatenate from typing. We use a lot of generics, everything, and it's also done more robust, which means that now there's some edge cases which I didn't handle properly, but now it handles them. And yeah, it also handles pagination, everything. So I want you to actually put side into side these two factories. So this is basically the first factory that I did when I joined. This was the stuff that I did when I was doing my interview. As you can see, it's around lines of code. It's pretty tangled. It uses a lot of it works. It does its job, but it basically everything that I did that day gets replaced by 70 lines of code. Which is well, actually it's not even 70. This dependency is not needed. So it's around 40 lines of code. So as you can see now, this has a lot of potential. Because contributors will be able to just say, okay, I want to basically mimic this endpoint, these parameters, and everything will be handled automatically. Everything is completely abstracted away, which is something super, super cool. So that's the first thing. We also have documentation for it, in which we go over the different examples. Let me show that super quick. So we go here, 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 yeah, here. So for example, here, this is how the new documentation looks like. We just need to create this configuration with some examples of what everything does. Then how we actually create a dependency, how it works, how we get the pagination, all the sources, everything, how the dependency system works. This is something that Ray recommended me to do when I was getting some feedback from him, that actually only the leaf nodes will be returned. If they have different shapes, they will be merged by DLT. So we can actually have normally one GraphQL factory means one shape of data. And then basically how this runs, when it runs, it generates this introspective GraphQL query, which automatically fetches everything up to the depth that we want. And then how the data just works in BigQuery. And we can also exclude fields if we don't want to. We can also, have stop conditions in the pagination. We have cursor-based pagination. And yeah, it's a really solid and robust factory. I'm going to do a small stop there in case anyone has any questions. And if not, I'll continue with the next thing.
Yeah, actually, first of all, sorry, I meant to review this, and thanks, Ray, for having done that. Yeah, last week, a couple things got in the way. But the question, so if you're traversing a large tree of objects, do they get loaded into separate tables, or are we merging? Are we treating it as all like a single giant table in, I guess, whatever database destination?
Yeah, so how it works basically is we don't load the table until we reach the leaf nodes. So basically only each leaf node will return a DLT resource, which is this unit of data. And then if they all have the same shape, they will be loaded at the same table. So let's say that each resource is basically just this chunk of data. So it will get yielded into the internal DLT Parquet file. And then when everything is ready, that Parquet file will get loaded. So it won't be loaded different. It's just how the transfer is done.
I see. Okay. Yeah, so they're all joined as
Yes.
different objects into JSON objects or something into or whatever kind of object into different columns.
Yep.
Am I understanding? Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So my question for you, Ruben, now that you've seen this, is I want a world where we go ham on GraphQL. So
Sure.
for example, there's a number of subgraphs that are really valuable, right? The three that we've been talking about internally forever now are ENS, EAS, and a couple of different token ones. Short of us actually decoding ERC20 logs ourselves or 721 logs ourselves, we could just go ham on some subgraphs that already monitor tokens. And so plethora of subgraphs that we probably want. What is it going to take to automate the rails such that like imagine a counterparty, which is either a human in the community or an agent that is using this and producing a bunch of PRs, right? Like, how do you stay sane, right? Like, you probably want some CI that actually deploys this and make sure that it doesn't break everything. You probably want to run it. You probably want to have some automated like data freshness and like liveness checks for all these different things. You probably want to, yeah, like the CI probably involves local testing on DuckDB, but then you also want to make sure that like when you're actually running it in production, if you had say 100 of these, that you're not going crazy on like alert issues. Curious like how you think about this, because
Yeah. I actually think so, despite us saying that maybe we don't need like different, so first of all, so there are many things with this. I would say yeah, the automated testing is kind of the first thing. If we can get really good CI where even we can run like a quote local like version of this, and then maybe these GraphQL crawler, I don't know if we have like a limit, right? Like that you can set. That'd be really cool if we could set a global limit, somehow. So just for testing, so we can actually like run, specific asset, like like Dagster assets, in CI. So that'd
We
be
probably set like a tag, and limit concurrency or something, and some limits. Yeah, that's how it
yeah. And then so that would be like an ideal case. And then just as like an operational thing to sort of prevent like system-wide failure is, I think separating code locations can be useful because we can separate code we know will definitely work, like written by us, and then code that maybe is written by either agents or external parties or something. We can separate those things out, and we can load we can do it categorically as well, right? It's like all the GraphQL things, maybe they run here, so if there is an error, it's not going to affect the SQL mesh stuff as well, right? So operationally, I would think that would be a good thing. And then this is I mean, I think data freshness stuff, we'll have to talk about how we can do that at scale, right? Like for each of these things. I think there's certain patterns that we're definitely going to be seeing, right, for each of these. So, and we've already kind of talked about how we can build that into these assets. So, yeah.
yeah, I would say let's start with the result, which is to say, now that factories exist, it literally costs us nothing to like, let's just like pick any 10 subgraphs you want. I've already mentioned some that we're already interested in, and let's just make the assets
Let's
for
just
them
go.
now,
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
That should be less than a half an hour exercise to do. But then it's like, okay, now that we have them, like the first part is just making the assets. The second part is making sure that like those assets are actually up to date and reliable, right? With some reasonable SLA. So yeah, I think we should just do it. I think this is like very low hanging fruit.
There's why not?
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Two things that I want to highlight before I pass to the second thing. Everything is fully typed. So it's pretty easy to use. We get a lot of autocomplete. We get like type hints when we are, maybe like the dependency function has the incorrect types. Everything's like perfect. And one thing that happens sometimes is like I have not implemented a fallback when there's, for example, a 503 in a service. I did get a lot of this in Open Collective, so I may need to want to add like a debound mechanism or something. I'll file an issue for that. So next thing that I want to show is like I've been doing also improvements on the AI workflow agent front. I have two mainly that are the ones that I'm going to show you. First of all is now workflows use strictly type pedantic classes. Which means that let me show you. So basically how it worked earlier is we have like this event class from like Llama index, which was like loosely typed, which means that whenever you access a property from it, it won't complain, because it's like designed to just like accept it. But if it's not there, it will just fail. which means that we had to actually use a lot of get attribute, or like check instances, and it was just like not ideal. So now what I did with this one is basically these classes now take this text to SQL start event, which is fully typed and takes all of the parameters that we want, and everything is just propagated into the end of like the workflows, and they are fully typed. As you can see here, they have the workflow type, everything is typed, and these mixins now take, for example, this text to SQL start event, which means that now this step will take the generic type, and everything else we can now, instead of like having to get the type as in like I don't know, event input ID, and having to get it like this, we can just get it event.id, and we can get just like event.synthesize response instead of using this get attribute. So everything is fully typed, which is pretty nice. And then we have like this event. So that's one that I wanted to show, which means that now when we're using this, everything is fully typed. Second one that I want to show is the OSO query engine. Yeah. So this one is fairly recent. I actually finished it before stand-up today. I wanted to finish it yesterday, but I just didn't have a lot of time. So basically what changes is like, basically how it worked earlier is we had this query engine tool, in which all of the logic from passing to like, from like actually doing a query was abstracted away in a tool, which means that it was opaque because we couldn't see it in the traces. We couldn't see it when it was performed. It was just opaque. So I had this issue in which what we wanted to do is, instead of like actually having it as a tool, we wanted to have it as a workflow, which is what I did earlier. So now we have this OSO query engine workflow mixin. That's a really long name, which has dependencies of everything that we need, and basically has all the logic in our workflow. So now we have this, for example, analyze schema event, which with a start query engine event that analyzes the schema, returns a schema analysis event. We have another step which takes these like, generate SQL from context. We have another step. And how it works now is when we actually want to call this tool, instead of running this, taking all of this code for the tool, we just return the start query engine event, which means that it will just, like go to that part of the mixin, run everything and come back. One thing that I realized with this architecture that we need to take extra care with is like, if we are not careful and contributors are not careful, we may introduce duplicate events where we have, for example, handlers for stuff that only should exist once, so we need to add a more strict typing or like type checking, because if we have, for example, a handler, let's say, for example, someone messes up and returns this text to SQL generation in 2 steps, we will have multiple listeners for it and it will break the flow. So the current architecture is super cool, super pretty, but if we're not careful and we actually, add something that duplicates something, everything will just like, so that we need to take into account. And I'll have to.
So that's actually an interesting one, because in some ways that's actually a feature, and because you might actually want to intercept some messages. Actually, so one of the things that we use for evals actually does that, right? So it listens on specific kinds of events just by adding that in there. But I think, yeah, like you're right. Like it would be better if we knew which ones are like the canonical path and which ones are more like logging or something, like if we were able to, tag them in some way, right? And I think that's definitely something we could do, and we would do that. Like we would have to update the meta class, but yeah, it's absolutely. I think that would be the right way to go about it. That way, we know what is the intended canonical path and what is simply an additional logging mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. I say this because I was like testing earlier, and I got into this circular, path.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I had to take some time to fix it.
One question with regards to this one. So the query engine tool, I'm curious actually, now that you've been messing around with it, do you think the query engine tool is actually the right abstraction for us still? Like, I'm curious if my thought, one of the thoughts that I had while doing this was maybe we might want to just take over some of the things that the query engine tool does, because it does all of the, like it calls an LLM on its own, at least yeah, that's what we had it doing. So I'm wondering if you would want to, if it would be better to just take over all of those intermediate steps so we can, you know, interject in between.
Yeah, I think like well, this is like so this PR is like a nice step because like we are gaining more it's like less opaque, you know. So
Mhm.
now basically sorry so now basically we can see everything that's happening under the hood. I
Mhm.
think like right now is not the time to approach this because we already have enough visibility into what's happening, but
Okay.
I think like when we want to have even more control over it, and we need to have control over like this specific part of how the LLM is called to squeeze that extra point of performance. That's the place where we need to do it. So
Sweet.
yes, I agree with you. I think we should do it, but I think we should do it once we have, for example, more than 50% of accuracy, and we make it a little bit faster.
Great. Sounds good. Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is great. And I owe you reviews on basically all of these things, and I will get
No
to it
worries.
today. So yeah.
No worries. Cool. So that is another thing. Another cool thing I wanted to show, and I'll be quick because I know we're like super over the time, but like yeah, it's been a packed sprint. Another cool thing is like where is this? This is the add SQL. Yeah. Here. So right now, as everyone knows, we have the Copilot, and it is connected to our MCP tool, which means that it has access to all of tools. So now, for example, it used the text SQL agent actually to get some code, and it actually generated this code, which then it's executed there. So yeah, this is like the PR, and if anyone wants to take a look, it's like 4646. It's a nice number. It's how basically the agent was iterating. I know there's like a log somewhere. Don't quote me on where, but it should be over there. So yeah, I want to use it more in the future, like in the close future, to be able to like have a better understanding of how it's actually doing the stuff. So that's another thing. We now have the Docker image and everything, so people can test it if they want. And to end, we also have the what's this one? Yeah. So we now have, as Carl said, the crypto ecosystems. How this works basically is like I added this update bundle action. What it does is basically it checks out the other repository, logs in, adds the app string, pulls everything. And then what it does is it chunks by 50 megabyte limit. So one limit that GitHub has is like it doesn't allow LFS, which is large file support for JIT on public forks to prevent abuse. So what I had to do is I had to like actually split into 50
Did not
megabytes.
know that.
Now we know. I had to split into chunks to overcome this limitation. I hash the chunks, which are deterministically ordered by the other tool that the guys at Crypto Ecosystem did. And then if nothing has changed, all the hashes will be the same, so nothing changed. And if it changes, well, it just update the chunks, which now means that we have like this export, which are like all the files, which then we consume here in open source server, OSO, warehouse, also Daxter, assets, crypto ecosystems. And the cool thing is like we use this factory, so we just export the zip, and the only thing we want to do is like, hey, get me all JSON files, and that just magically works. And then yeah, it gets fed upstream. So
Sweet.
yeah, that's
Sweet.
that's basically it. It's been a packed sprint.
Yeah, nicely done.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, Reuven, I'm gonna before I go on vacation, I'm gonna basically create a project source for all of crypto ecosystems.
Cool.
Get ready. We're gonna be
Let's go. Yeah. Cool.
60,000
Yeah.
projects.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we have the infrastructure we have. We're gonna find out. Yeah.
Sweet. All right.
What day are you? It's in this next sprint, Carl?
Yeah, I'll be leaving Friday afternoon or so.
Oh, sweet. Okay, awesome.
I'll be like online-ish, or we can get off.
I mean, yeah, we can. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.